Women's football in Nigeria today is celebrated across Africa and the world. The Super Falcons are not only the most successful women's national team in Africa, but also a symbol of strength, resilience, and dominance. With 11 Women's Africa Cup of Nations WAFCON titles, multiple World Cup appearances, and a steady stream of talent shining abroad, the Super Falcons are recognized as Africa's queens of football. But this success story didn't just begin with today's generation. Long before Asisa Tashola, Rasheedat Ajibade, and Chiamaka Nnadozie became household names, there were women who broke barriers, endured hardship, and laid the foundation for Nigeria's women's football. These pioneers played in a time when the game received little or no support. They fought cultural resistance, lack of recognition, and the absence of basic infrastructure. Yet, through their passion and sacrifices, they gave Nigerian girls a platform to dream and play. In this post, we celebrate 5 legendary Super Falcons players who laid the foundation for women's football in Nigeria. 1. Chiin, the guardian of history. Every great team starts from the back, and for Nigeria, Chiin was that wall of confidence. She was the first choice goalkeeper for the Super Falcons at the 1991 FIFA Women's World Cup, the very first edition of the tournament. For context, that World Cup marked the global recognition of women's football, and Nigeria was Africa's representative. And was thrown into the global spotlight at a time when Nigerian women footballers were treated with skepticism. Many people doubted that women should even play the game. But she stood tall in goal, literally defending not just Nigeria but the future of women's football on the continent. Her bravery between the sticks inspired confidence in her teammates, and later featured in subsequent World Cups and Africa tournaments, winning multiple WAFCON titles with the Falcons. Beyond playing, she also transitioned into coaching, becoming an assistant coach of the national team. She used her experience to groom the next generation of goalkeepers, proving that her contribution to women's football went beyond her playing years. Without pioneers like Chiin, who stood firm in goal during Nigeria's earliest matches on the world stage, the Falcons may not have had the foundation to grow into the global brand they are today. 2. Florence Omagbemi, the midfield general and leader. If you talk about leadership in Nigerian women's football, Florence Omagbemi is a name that must be mentioned. She was the heartbeat of the Super Falcons midfield in the 1990s and early 2000s, a captain who led by example both on and off the pitch. Omagbemi was part of the Falcons' golden generation, the team that dominated African football and carried Nigeria's flag proudly at global tournaments. She featured at 4 FIFA Women's World Cups and represented Nigeria at the Olympic Games, milestones that were rare for African footballers at the time. But her contribution did not stop with her playing career. Florence became a coach, and in 2016, she guided Nigeria to victory at the Women's Africa Cup of Nations. That triumph made her the first woman to win the WAFCON both as a player and as a coach, a record that highlights her legendary status. Her influence was not just technical. As captain and later coach, she instilled belief in young players, showing them that African women could compete at the highest level. Omagbemi's story represents resilience, leadership, and the breaking of boundaries in a sport where women often had to fight for respect. 3. Stella Mbachu, the tireless winger. For over a decade, Stella Mbachu was one of the most reliable players for the Super Falcons. Known for her blistering pace, skill, and endless energy on the flanks, she gave defenders sleepless nights. Mbachu represented Nigeria at 4 FIFA Women's World Cups and 3 Olympic Games, proving her consistency at the highest level of football. At a time when women's football in Nigeria faced funding issues and limited exposure, Stella was one of the few players who remained committed, always answering the call to represent her country. Her style of play was direct and fearless. She wasn't the most celebrated player in the media, but her impact on the pitch was undeniable. For many young girls watching the Falcons in the 1990s and 2000s, Stella was proof that Nigerian women could run with the best in the world. Even though her name doesn't come up as often today, her legacy lives in the attacking flair of modern Super Falcons stars like Rasheedat Ajibade and Francisca Ortega, who play with the same energy and determination. 4. Mercy Akide, the first global superstar. If there is one woman who opened the door for Nigerian players to play professionally abroad, it is Mercy Akide. She was Nigeria's first true global superstar in women's football. Akide rose to prominence as she was Nigeria's first true global superstar in women's football. Akide rose to prominence at the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup, where Nigeria shocked the world by reaching the quarter-finals. Mercy's goals, strength, and charisma made her a fan favorite, and soon after, she earned a professional contract in the United States. This was groundbreaking at the time, because it showed that African women could attract global recognition and opportunities. In 2001, Mercy Akide made history as the first woman to win the CAF African Women's Footballer of the Year award. Her achievements inspired a generation of Nigerian girls, proving that women could not only play football but also become international stars. Her move to the United States also paved the way for players like Perpetua Nkwocha, Cynthia Uwake, Asisat Oshoala, and others to dream of careers abroad. Today, Nigerian women are some of the most sought-after professionals in Europe and America, and much of that credit goes back to pioneers like Mercy Akide. 5. Perpetua Nkwocha, the goal machine. No discussion about the pioneers of Nigerian women's football is complete without Perpetua Nkwocha. She is widely regarded as one of the greatest female footballers in African history. Nkwocha was the ultimate goal machine for the Super Falcons. At the 2004 Women's Africa Cup of Nations, she scored a staggering 9 goals, including 4 in the final against Cameroon. That performance alone made her a legend. But she didn't stop there. She went on to win the African Women's Footballer of the Year award 4 times: 2004, 2005, 2010, 2011. Her influence extended beyond Nigeria. Perpetua played professionally in Sweden, becoming a role model for African players in Europe. She demonstrated that Nigerian women could dominate not only in Africa but also on international soil. Today, Nkwocha remains an icon for young players. Her goal-scoring records at WAFCON remain untouched, and her dedication to the Falcons in the 2000s and early 2010s gave Nigeria an edge that no other African team could match. The Super Falcons story is a story of resilience. Before the fame of Asisat Oshoala, before the saves of Chiamaka Nadozie, and before the rise of Rasheedat Ajibade, there were pioneers who played with little recognition, endured poor facilities, and yet carried Nigeria on their shoulders. And Chiin gave Nigeria stability and goal at the dawn of women's football. Florence Omagbemi led with courage and later coached with wisdom. Stella Mbachu provided consistency and tireless energy. Mercy Akide became the first African woman to break into global stardom. And Perpetua Nkwocha set records that remain untouched. These 5 women laid the foundation for women's football in Nigeria. Without them, the success of today's Super Falcons' 11 WAFCON titles, consistent World Cup appearances, and global recognition would not have been possible. Their legacy is clear. They turned women's football in Nigeria from a forgotten pastime into a global powerhouse.